Let's look at the Eid-el-Fitr we're talking about now. So many ways to describe it. Some say that it's the festival of crescent moon, and some call it the festival of duration, the festival of celebration, and some say that it is the feast of sugar and all that, the feast of the reflection and growth. Now, what exactly is Eid-el-Fitr?
Well, thank you for having me. Good morning, Assalamu alaikum, brothers. Eid-el-Fitr simply means the festival, the celebration that Muslims have after a long month of spiritual tutelage under Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where they would have been expected to undergo a mental as well as attitudinal transition, which prepares them, as it were, for another journey of 11 months if Allah spares their lives. So it is like someone celebrating that, yes, I have been able to go through the furnace and came out unscathed. I have become deeply spiritually enriched. I have experienced enlargement in all that is of value. And so you find that is an experience where the individual is saying, yes, I'm a conqueror over things that are subordinary, over things that are sensualistic, over things that do not ordinarily edify, things that ought to, at the very best, be rendered as ancillary to what is far much more fundamental, what is to enhance the essence of our being. So it's in that context that we get involved in this celebration. It is triumph over self, triumph over the whims and caprices of the individual, triumph of the individual's ability to experience connectedness once again with the source of being. That is, in a nutshell, what it represents.
Okay. All right. So we understand that for the past 30 days or more, you've been fasting, and for lots of Muslims out there. But let's look at how special the Eid-el-Fitr is to you as a Muslim.
Well, like I said, it's significant in the sense that you have just gone through 30 days of not just staying away from food and every other thing that you stayed away from when you were fasting, because you could have as well stayed away from those things even when it was not in the period of
So why necessarily
Ramadan.
Staying away from
Yes,
food?
you stay away because it is a command that is to test one's capacity for patience, one's capacity for toleration of hunger, one's capacity for appreciating what it is to find oneself in a space that is essentially dedicated to unquestionable, unflagging loyalty to the Creator. So you practice fidelity. It's about the only act where one's fidelity can either be established or destroyed. Fidelity, because if I join the congregation, for example, to observe prayers, I may succeed in deceiving myself that, yes, I'm praying, when the fact of the matter is that I'm not connected with that which is the basis of prayers. I could do every other act of worship, but it's only in fasting where the individual has all the opportunities in the world to go in infraction of whatever, even when such opportunities are available, is able to restrain itself, is able to curtail that addiction, that propensity, that proclivity towards disobedience. And so when one looks at this, you find that it is a unique thing. That, again, is what gives uniqueness to what we do in the month of Ramadan.
Okay. On Eid-el-Fitr Day, we understand that the male Muslims, gather just as the female Muslims gather too. Maybe to want to ask questions about what you said about fidelity. What is the situation around the fact that the male Muslims don't gather together with the female Muslims to pray on Eid-el-Fitr Day?
But of course, the male and the females are involved in the prayer.
I know, but
in fact, females, even when they are observing their circle, which excuses them from prayers, they are required to come around the vicinity of the prayer ground. But except that we do not observe the same rules, whether it's in Eid-el-Fitr or the ordinary prayer, the females will line behind the males. Because what Islam does is to close the door to whatever can provoke or precipitate temptation. Because if a woman were to be on the same side, let us not pretend. If a woman were to be on the same side with man, that could cause serious distraction to both parties. And so, because of the possibility of that happening, and in order to minimize the likelihood or the possibility of it happening, they are to occupy different roles. They don't stay on the same role.
Okay, all right. So is that somehow also related to that the male Muslims must wear some form of perfume on the day of the Eid-el-Fitr during the prayers?
Yes.
And the female Muslims
yes,
don't
you see,
necessarily
you see, the male Muslims are required to perfume. The female Muslims are denied this because in most instances, the minds of men highly diseased. Oh, the woman wears a very powerful perfume. You smell the perfume and say, that's a good one. And so that's a good one. And that can open the door for all other things that will lead to the infraction of Allah's law. In order to minimize or eliminate the possibility or the likelihood of that happening, they are required to come in their normal whatever. Not perfuming themselves.
Now, I'm trying to look at it from my own common way of looking at it. You know, I mean, for somebody that has a sincerity of purpose to do some form of worship to his creator, do you think anything can really distract that person if that person is so focused?
We are in a world, except we choose to take a flight into fantasy. The fact of the matter is that if there were no distractions, then the whole essence of the spiritual struggle would have lost its meaning. So it is the distraction and the capacity to withstand those distractions that gives significance and uniqueness to all of that struggle. And so it is there. It doesn't matter what the sincerity is or the absence of it. Do not again forget that we are differently wired. There are some persons who may not be moved, but there are persons who are weak. We do not, the level of spirituality for individuals do not, the levels don't exist in equipoise. So some are much stronger than the others. For those who are less in terms of spirituality, they require some protection. It's on the basis of this general protection, because you remember that a chain is said to be as strong as its weakest point. And so what you therefore will be providing for is not what aspect of the chain is much more solid. It is the aspect that is weakest that you become much more concerned about, that you must protect, because once it gets fractured, the totality of the chain and its usefulness is destroyed.
Okay. All right. So the Eid-el-Fitr also brings about things that you must forbid as a Muslim. You want to talk about those things?
Well, Eid-el-Fitr is a celebration you are coming into after you had undergone a spiritual peregrination. It is only proper that you do not return to things that are going to vitiate or that will amount to a celebration of the very Satan you had conquered.
Yeah, things like what?
So you stay away from alcohol.
Okay.
You stay away from things that you are ordinarily prohibited from doing, prostitution, copulation with someone with whom you have no legitimate relationship. You go into, for example, a celebration, I need to celebrate big, and so you have access to public patrimony, you are engaged in the defecation of that, you appropriate what does not belong to you in order for you to have a big Salah celebration and all that. All of these will go on to defeat all of that 30 days experience that you have had.
Are there particular food that we should also forbid too?
Well, the ordinary food that we forbid are food we continue to forbid. For example, you don't have to celebrate using pork meat. because it is forbidden. There are only, except when there are
some of these
extenuating
things are
circumstances.
individualistic at times. You know, we're looking at it within the generality of being a Muslim now.
Yes. You said individual what? I didn't get your question.
Some persons, for personal reasons, they don't go there at all. They don't take pork meat and all
Fine.
that. All right, so...
Yes, I'm saying, as a general rule,
Yeah.
Muslims are prohibited from taking pork, except there are extenuating circumstances.
Okay.
Now, you do not have to take anything that is intoxicant. I have said that before. You don't have to take food that is going to be injurious to the body. Those things that fall into the category of what is established. And of course, whether it's a meal that is ordinarily legitimate, once the means, the provenance of that particular meal becomes contaminated, it correspondingly contaminates. So if I went to market, for example, to buy rice, which is ordinarily lawful for any Muslim to take, and the source of the money with which the rice was bought was stolen money, the food itself becomes toxic.
All right, so let's take it further now before we allow you to go. I know that you are here this morning on the strength of the Chief Imam of Edo State, Chief in Nabulele now. Now, what would you want to say is the significance of Eid-el-Fitr to us as a nation?
The significance of Eid-el-Fitr is, to us as Muslims, is that we are coming out of a battle where we are pronounced as victors. We therefore will need to ask the question, what was the nature of the battle? What was the significance of the battle? We stayed away from food, we stayed away from legitimate sexual relationship, we stayed away from drink. We became increasingly solicitous for the well-being of those who were less privileged. All of these were things we learned in the course of that struggle. And so in that struggle, we were stripped, so to say, of our wrapper of putrefaction, and we are done in the wrapper of immaculateness. And now we have returned to the larger society. It was like a kind of a retreat. We have returned to a larger society, a society that is dark, a society that is deeply steeped in putridity. And so we are supposed to be ones who will help to manumit this society. Manumit it by enriching society with the spiritual vaccination that we have just taken, by ensuring that all of those vices we were weaned from these past 30 days, we do not only not return to practicing of those vices, but we become, agents of change, bringing about the rarefaction of society that had experienced debauchery, bringing about the transformation of society, bringing about the manumission, so to speak, of people who have become enslaved as a result of their addiction to sublunary stuff. When we do this as a people, when we relate, because in that period of 30 days, a community was built, a community of spirituality. In that community, we discovered the creation of abundance. And so we came into the realization that when things coagulate in the hands of insignificant few, it precipitates crisis. It releases the banditry of squalor, the banditry of trepidation, the banditry of hollowness. Now, when you walk within community and you create connectedness, it will mean that there will be an enlargement of provision. What community tells us, what does happen, because there were no people in these 30 days of Ramadan who operated within the community, the real community of the Muslim Ummah, that experienced lack of food when they needed to eat in the morning, what you call the sahur, or when it was time for them to break the fast, they couldn't break the fast. Also, for them, fasting was a continuum. That didn't happen. There was surplus, there was abundance. And you now ask, where was this abundance created within 30 days? It was always there, except that because of the absence of connectedness, which is only possible when you build a community and it consequently will bring about abundance, that stimulated and precipitated all that we had. And if we want a continuation of that, there must be the sustenance of community, and that must defeat individualism. Because I have experienced hunger. It became compulsory for me to experience hunger even when I had a warehouse of food. And so I know what it is now for someone who didn't have access to food, what that individual feels on a regular basis.
Okay.
And so I must therefore intervene on a sustainable basis in a way that eliminates hunger.
All right, so I'll come back to you experiencing hunger, but you also said something that you eat in the morning before the fasting commences. So we're going to look at that now, how you eat in the morning, then you still experience hunger and all that. Now, my co-anchor in Abuja, Tolu Tokbe Oguntume, has one or two questions. Tolu Tokbe, over to you now. Okay, all right, so he's, all right, Tolu.
So we're looking at the celebration of Eid-el-Fitr. For our guest there right there, looking at it right now, for put into consideration some of the things that is happening in the country, especially with the spirit of Ramadan, how will you advise Nigerians to be able to manage themselves and also look at constructive way of really making sure that the government carry out the right thing, put into consideration the Eid-el-Fitr period? How will you advise Nigerians to do that?
All right, so I think he's asking, how would you advise the Nigerian government to carry on looking at the things happening in the country, you know, trying to look at the significance, the importance of the Eid-el-Fitr.
Well, okay, I get the point now. I think leadership is a big tax, is a trust on the part of the one who has carried leadership, because it is pitiable if you, for example, exercise leadership and you eat to your fill, and those over whom you superintend are living in necessity of life. So we want to say, in this country, there is abundance of resources. Allah had been utmostly generous to us. But the problem we have is that these resources are in the hands of very insignificant few. Not because they have worked the others, but because they have taken advantage of the position of authority they occupy to defecate what is the collective patrimony. And so we require that those who are in government should find the intrepidity to deal with the issue of corruption and to promote productivity and to reward only hard work. Once we do all of this, I can assure you that we will all return to clover, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed this country with all that we require to live a life of clover.
Okay. All right. So, Tolu, I think if you still have one or two questions, you can ask, because Nuruddin is right here and ready to attend to your questions, so that viewers in Abuja this morning can also know what's
I do want to take him from this perspective. Put into consideration that in the north here, people have the habit of trying to live within their means. That was in the past, I must say. But gradually things are changing. There is this feeling that everybody wants to acquire. Everybody wants to take more than for them. And it's really eating up the economy, the nation. Put into consideration some of the tenets of Ramadan and also the spirit of Eid-el-Fitr. How do we control this urge? How do people realize that no matter the amount of things you try to amass, it will still not give you the happiness you need? There is happiness in being able to give, and there is happiness in being satisfied with little you earn. How do we make people realize this?
Is that the Quran, for example, talks about what is success outside the parameters that we have used in defining success. Success is not necessarily how stupendously rich the individual is. Success must be seen from the context of, does the fellow live a life that impacts? If you do not live a life that impacts you, obviously you are not successful. It doesn't matter whether you are a trillionaire. It doesn't matter what you are. Does your life add value? Does it have a utilitarian value for people who are around you? And until and unless you do that, you have issues. So you find that, for example, the Eid-el-Fitr we are involved in now, where we are required before we go to Eid to give out food to people who are unable. Compulsorily, we are not doing them a favor. Otherwise, our fast become invalid if we are not to do that. You measure on the basis of the number of persons who are under you. You give to those who cannot, so that when you are feasting, they will not continue to be fasting. They will participate in their own homes without necessarily becoming indebted to you for that happening. If we were to do that, and again, you look at the 2.something% you give, 2.5% you are required to give from your legitimate earning when it has reached a certain level. It is to discourage the spirit of accumulation. Because the Prophet tells us, what you have given out is what is your own. What you left behind is not yours. Those who come into its patrimony when you are gone, they are the ones who get rewarded if they used it positively. And if it is negatively used, because you are the provenance of that which has been negatively used, you get part of the evil, even in your grave. And so, what Ramadan has told us is that what we require in life is minimal. So we can't define life from the context of what is sensualistic. It doesn't matter whether you have 20 vehicles in your home. It doesn't matter whether you stay in a 50-bedroom apartment. All of this will asphyxiate you if in your neighborhood you do not represent anything of value to those persons who are there. If people would not miss you even when you leave, not to talk of when you are gone, then it will mean that every dry leaf that falls off the top of a tree has greater use in the neighborhood than you are. And so basically that is what Ramadan was supposed to teach us, to become solicitous. So if I am going to be bothered about another person who had not eaten, why should I take the pains of having to steal what is not mine? Because if we're not busy involved in this rat race of wanting to take what does not belong to us, there will be sufficiency in the system for everybody to feel comfortable.
Okay. All right. So, Tolu, I think you have done that. Now, let me come to, the points at which you were trying to make earlier on. Talking about eating in the morning before your fast commences in the morning. Now, for non-Muslims now, they probably find it difficult to understand and accept, because this Eid-el-Fitr, like we're trying to describe it a while ago, is a festival of self-denial as it relates to food. Now, you are believed to have gone through hunger for some days now, but all those 30 days in the morning you ate. So how do you put that together?
Well, essential part of the fast is that you take the early morning food. It doesn't matter how light it was, you are required to take it, and it is because it is blessed. And people have asked the question, you ate twice a day. There are people who just eat once a day. So what is the fast there? And I tell them, I said, there is a difference between when I choose to stay in my house the whole day and go nowhere, and from when I am restricted. And somebody says, hey, you don't move out of this place. The tension that is generated, not the same. So here, you are under an instruction to do X, Y, Z. It is that instruction you are under that makes the difference. It is the same whatever that you could write anything under an exam situation, it becomes different. All of the spellings you could spell with relative ease, when it comes to exam, they evaporate. You have difficulty recalling them. So you ask the question, is it not the same you? What I tell people is just that. And for anyone who says, oh, it's so insignificant, I say, until and unless you are a participant in it, you cannot appreciate the test that is in it.
All right, so we understand that there are ways you must celebrate. If you have to celebrate the Eid-el-Fitr, and of course there are things that you must do. We're saying this morning so that the viewing public there should know. Now, are there particular ways to go about this celebration?
Well, in the morning, we wake up, take food. We are required to eat food, which we're not doing anymore, because before now, we stay away between 13 and 14 hours a day without food. Now you eat, dress, put on the best of attire that you have. We say the best of attire that you have. It doesn't matter whether it costs you 2 1,000 naira or 1,000 naira to get, but it represents the best you have to evidence the fact that you are in a celebratory mood. And you go to a praying ground, which is usually at the outskirts of the community, to observe 2 raka prayers to be led by the imam. And when the imam is done, he gives you sermon of the significance of what you have done and the need for you to remain in that spirit, in that mood. Then you return home, you cook food and enjoy with your family members and extend to friends and relatives around and those who ordinarily do not have the means to do that for themselves. Then you glorify Allah. That will do, oh, Allah is clean, Allah is great. We do that for the next 3 days because the celebration will cover a period of 3 days and then we are home and dry.
All right. So after 3 days now, the celebration ends.
Yes.
So if you put that together now, by Friday, we'll be done with this celebration.
We'll be done, except that the average Muslim will remember that he has 6 additional days to fast before this new moon, this new month we have entered, which is the 10th month, the month of Shawwal.
What do you mean by the average Muslim?
The additional 6 days of fasting. When we do that, it will seem as if we had fasted the whole year. We've done 30 now, and in Islam we have 360 days in a year. Each day, the equivalent of every good act is said to be 10. So if you multiply the 10 by 30, that gives us 300. And so when we do the additional 6 days before the end of the month of Shawwal, that additional 60, you add it to the 300, you have 360. So it is analogous to one who had fasted round the circle.
All right, so what you're saying in essence that by Friday now, the fast
before this is just the first day, and so it will mean that we have 28 additional days. Okay. Before the end of these 28 additional days, we are required to do 6 days of fast. Okay. You can do them consecutively or you just space them.
All right, so you are a big man in Islam in Edo State now. So what's your message to your fellow brothers and sisters out there this morning?
Well, the message is that we have undergone an experience, and that experience is supposed to reflect in society. We are supposed to be different from those who didn't have this experience. And so we don't come, if we represented light and we enter into a place that had not seen light, that place should be illumined. If the place remains as dark as it were before we returned, it will mean that all that we have done was an exercise in dissipation. We have been involved in act of generosity. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not restricted to the month of Ramadan. When an individual begins to say, oh, the reward in Ramadan is much greater than any other time, and therefore I will restrict my act, it will mean that the relationship the person has with his creator is still commercial. And so it's like one who says, I will order this product now and wait for the season when it is highest. That person has not learned. Because if the individual is in a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it will mean that it's a relationship that does not monetize, does not commercialize itself with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It just sees that there is this being. And so one becomes addictive in wanting to continuously, does what is right at all material. So that must be the spirit. Let nobody tell the difference. If we had practiced patience, which is a requirement for us to be able to deal with one another in community in the month of Ramadan, it is expected that that patience must continue. If one had gone to school, acquired knowledge, made all the A's, and he comes into the workplace where there is a requirement for a practical demonstration of the knowledge the person has, and the fellow is unable to do so, it will mean that there is fakery in the claim of that person to having acquired that kind of knowledge. So that must not be the case. Our generosity must remain. our relationship with the book of guidance, which is the Quran, must remain. In other words, we must read and listen to the voiceless message there and give voice to it by our activities. And when we do all this, then it will mean that we truly are beneficiaries of this exercise we are just done with.
Okay, so we want to say a very big thank you, Nuruddin Asunoge, for finding time to come. We know that it's a very tight period for you this morning, but you had to come, and we believe that you still meet the prayers at the Eid ground so that the celebration starts. So thank you so much for coming.